Hey guys, what's up? So let us begin with the lecture, first informative lecture of this topic, Perspectives in Human Geography, presented by the Book Bencher. So what is geography? We all know it's a social science, but what does it teach us? So broadly speaking, it is the study of human environment relationship, and its subject matter is divided into two parts, that is physical geography and human geography. So this topic, perspectives in human geography, it gives us different viewpoints to study human geography. So some of them I have listed below. These are such as the objective view, or we can say that it is based upon realism, the idea of realism. What does it state? It states that reality is external and what we can directly observe. Thus, knowledge should take into account only the objective truth. For example, what a person can see, that is the reality, and nothing more, nothing less. Similarly, another view is the subjective view, and it is based upon the philosophy of anti-realism. So what does it state? It states that reality that we see is a projection of mind, and what we are seeing may not be the true reality. And it means that different person can see the same thing in a different manner. And one of the philosophers, very good philosophers, Immanuel Kant, he said that true reality is noumena, but different people see different phenomena due to the influence of their mind. So, and this is dependent upon what all experiences they have. So, the phenomena that each person see depends upon the experiences that person has had. So, the knowledge should focus on understanding of phenomena by using philosophical methods. So this may seem a little bit philosophical. Let me try to explain it in detail. For example, let us say that there is an object and there is a person here. Okay. There is another person here and there is another person here. So this person may see this object as an egg. This person may see this object as a ball, and this person may see this object as a potato. Just because this person may have never seen, this particular person may have never seen an egg or a potato, so he may visualize this round object as a ball, and this particular person may not have seen a ball or an egg, but he would have been well versed with potatoes, so he may visualize this particular object as a potato. This person who is more well versed, he may be able to differentiate it as an egg. So this is the actual reality, which is the noumena, that is this egg. And what these persons, these three different persons are seeing, it is the phenomena. So, and there here is the filter, you can say. So this filter is the due to whatever knowledge they have and due to their experiences. Through this filter, they perceive this object differently. So that is the point of the subjective view. So moving forward, there is another subdivision, that is the regional approach or the systematic approach within human geography. So in regional approach, we study the uniqueness of regions. There may be 5 different types of regions, and we may be studying the uniqueness of them. So that like for example, one region may be a polar region, one region may be a desert region, and like that. So another approach is the systematic approach. In this, we study the common aspects across regions and formulate universal laws to explain the same. For example, India may have different regions. For example, the Bundelkhand Plateau, the Deccan Plateau, the Gangetic Plains, but there may be some common aspects. For example, a common religion, that is Hinduism, or for example, the seasons that we experience, the phenomena of monsoon. So, systematic approach tries to study these aspects that are common across the region, and it may formulate a law. For example, India is a country which has Hindu majority. So this is like a lawmaking by studying different regions. Understood? So moving forward, we have another subdivision of approaches, that is nomothetic approach and ideographic approach. So nomothetic approach is the lawmaking approach. It is a scientific approach in which we try to formulate universal laws and models, and ideographic approach, in that we study the unique features of regions. So that is it. And you may be getting mind boggled by these terms, but don't worry, you'll understand them better as we move forward in the course. Okay. So different methodologies to study human geography. So one is the scientific methodology. So it is based upon the idea of realism and deals with making universal laws in scientific methodology. And there is a philosophical methodology which is based upon the idea of anti-realism, and it tries to understand the different phenomena, the variability of phenomena in different places. And within scientific methodology, there are two methods of making universal laws. Just as I told you that scientific methodology deals with making universal laws. So what are the two methods? They are inductive method or the deductive method. So just try and understand this. There is some, let us say there is some geographical information. Okay. And using that geographical information, we formulate a hypothesis. Now, what is an hypothesis? It is an idea which may not be validated. Like, it is not a law. We are just hypothesizing. For example, in the earlier times, people used to say that since God is angry, so thunder is the result of it. So it is an idea using some information, geographical information, that there is lightning and thunder and things like that. So, and the hypothesis may be validated. Like some person may have said that when clouds come, then only rain occurs. So he may put it into a theory or a model. So you develop theories and models which are validated, and they are above hypothesis in the hierarchy, we can say. So an example is the central place theory, which many of you must have studied or at least heard about it. It is a part of settlement geography. And using these models and theories, we can make a law, like the law of centrality. So this is more superior to these models and theories. For example, many models and theories can be based upon one law. Law is one that is proven. For example, law of centrality governs the central place theory. And there are several models and several theories that are based upon the law of gravitation, for example, given by Newton. And at the top sits this approach or the viewpoint, for example, geographical approach, economic approach, historical approach. So what do we do? In inductive methodology, I will say, carefully listen, inductive methodology, we go from particular to general. For example, we start with geographical information, and the way I explained, we move up the ladder to reach the viewpoint or the approach. So that is the inductive methodology. A very good example is Sherlock Holmes. Okay. Yes. Sherlock Holmes. So what did he do? He first observed the pattern, observed phenomena, then he formulated some patterns, developed some hypotheses, and from those hypotheses he developed, okay, so this will be the theory that is governing this person's mind. So that is how he worked. This is called inductive methodology, the way Sherlock Holmes worked. Another methodology is the deductive methodology, in which we move from general to particular. For example, we formulate a general law, that is law of centrality, and from that we move to particular, that is central place theory, and from that we try to justify the different phenomena observed in space and we confirm them. So this is a deductive methodology. So Aristotle, which was a famous philosopher, he worked upon this methodology. That is, first formulate a theory, a general theory, and then formulate hypothesis, and then use that hypothesis to explain observation. I repeat, explain different observations or explain different phenomena that you observe, and then confirm that your particular law or theory that you proposed in the first place was correct. So another example I can give you, for example, in case of inductive methodology, it is the census. For example, in census, we move from geographical information to laws. Like in census, we collect geographical information. So that is geographical information. We may formulate some models and theories, and finally, we may arrive at some law. Fine. That the northern region experiences harsh winters. Sorry, this is not based upon the census. The northern region has higher total fertility rate. So after the analysis of geographical information, we move up the ladder and we formulate this inductive, this law using inductive methodology. So in case of deductive methodology, we start from a law. For example, the diffusion of information. This is a law. And using this law, we can say that southern India has higher literacy due to the presence of ports. Every one of you knows that India is a tapered peninsula. There is Kolkata here, there is Chennai here, there is Mumbai here. So southern India has more number of ports. So what happens that the diffusion of information from other parts of the world has been faster in southern India. So it has higher literacy. Fine. I hope you have at least a hang of the concepts inductive methodology and deductive methodology. So moving forward, theory of paradigms. So you must have encountered this word. A question I think has also come in UPSC previous year about paradigm. So what is paradigm? Paradigm is a stage in the development of a discipline when one idea becomes the dominant idea and all research goes to prove that idea through models and theories. So as per Kuhn, he is a very important philosopher who studied the development of sciences. So as per Kuhn, development of sciences takes place in paradigms, where inductive methods are used to put forward an idea which becomes the dominant idea. For example, inductive methodology was used by Newton to formulate the law of gravitation. He observed some phenomena like a falling apple. Remember, let's go to the previous slide. In inductive, you move from information to a law. So he observed a falling apple and he made the law of gravitation using inductive methodology. Then deductive methods were used to develop models and theories to validate that particular idea, that is the law of gravitation. For example, different things were explained like the motion of planets and moons around the sun due to gravitation. So same law was used. So now we are moving from the law to explain different phenomena or different observations, from the law to explain different observations. So this is the deductive approach. So in a paradigm, a new idea comes, like first of all, assume that there was no information. There was no idea about how things work, how a particular phenomena occurred. Then a particular philosopher came and gave a law. So this was the intellectual level of a society. Then a particular philosopher came, for example Newton, and gave the law of gravitation. So it was a new paradigm. So here you can say the paradigm has started. But Okay, so now you have a law here at this point. Fine. So now the development has occurred at a very fast pace because a particular philosopher has given a law. Now the development of the discipline will go on slowly. And since it is following a deductive approach and different models and theories are explaining the same law, that is the law of gravitation. Then there may be some crisis, then another inductive approach may be used to develop a new paradigm. So that is how the development of a discipline progresses. Fine. So let us move forward. So paradigm presents an approach or a viewpoint and a paradigm. That is, for example, this is the gravitation paradigm. It has the presence of exemplars. Now, who are these exemplars? These are symbols of the paradigm. And these can be either books or scholars. For example, in our case, Newton is an exemplar. And a paradigm may adopt a deductive approach or an inductive approach or a philosophical approach. Fine, like QR adopted a deductive approach. Behavioralism adopted an inductive approach. Humanism adopted a philosophical approach. Okay, so let's move further. So sequence of development of a discipline, what I was explaining you here. So it happens in the following manner. First, a paradigm is established. Then some contradictions may arrive. Fine. And at this point of stage, since the law is so strong, those are considered exceptions. Okay, fine, these can happen. Then finally, when these exceptions start growing, then there develops a crisis known as paradigm crisis. And from this crisis, new ideas emerge. And this lead to finally the development of a new paradigm. Example, let us say that in our case, that is the gravitation law, it was a paradigm. So some contradictions came, like some phenomena, science students can understand it better. Like many scientists were able to say that whatever Newton said didn't happen at the particle level, at the quantum level. So initially these were considered exceptions, and many phenomena, for example, the wrapping of speed and time, the principles of relativity, these were unknown at that time. So when these principles start to emerge, the phenomena that Newtonian physics was not able to explain, for example, the expansion of universe. So there started to emerge a bigger crisis. Now there were no more exceptions. Initially there were exceptions. Okay, fine, light is a particle or a wave. So okay, light is a wave as per Newton, or a particle as per Newton. So waves are exceptions. But as these exceptions grew, there came to be a crisis. Many phenomena they were not able to explain. Many observations, like I said, expansion of universe. So now emerges a new idea, the emergence of Albert Einstein. So he gives the general theory of relativity, then the special theory of relativity, and then this leads to the establishment of new paradigm in physics. Fine, this paradigm revolves around the dual nature of matter, and that's how the establishment of a discipline takes place, the development of a discipline takes place. So in case of geography, it is very important. Berry and Shorley, you can remember these names, showed that geography also has paradigms and is therefore a scientific discipline. So remember, Kuhn said that development of sciences takes place through paradigms. And since Berry and Shorley are able to prove that geography has paradigms, they are able to show that geography is a scientific discipline. So you must understand that these geographers, they always want to show that geography is a science, because sciences have a greater stature than social sciences in academics. Every one of us knows, because you know that if in a university the science department always gets much more funds. So these philosophers are trying to prove very surely that geography is also a science. Now let us learn about the sequence of development of geography as a discipline as suggested by Berry and Shorley. So from ancient period till the end of pre-modern era, that is 1859. So I will be dealing with this what is pre-modern era, intermediate era, modern era, postmodern era in the next video, that is about the history of geography. So just bear with me with this through this particular slide. Okay. So in the non-paradigmatic stage, there was not a single idea that was a dominant idea. There were several ideas like catastrophism, naturalism, and for example, catastrophism meant that these catastrophes like meteor strike or volcanoes have shaped the surface of Earth. And naturalism propagated that the Earth or the nature influences human activities, and like this there were many different ideas, and this was basically a non-paradigmatic stage. Then from 1859 onwards till the Second World War, we saw dual paradigmatic stage, and in this there were two subparts. So the first one was from 1859 till the end of World War I. So it was determinism of Ratzel versus possibilism of Vitale. Fine. So this was 1859 to World War I. Then from World War I to World War II, we had cultural determinism of Carl Sawyer and areal differentiation of Hartshorne. So this was a dual paradigmatic stage. And between this non-paradigmatic stage and dual paradigmatic stage, there was a transition phase. For example, this non-paradigmatic stage focused on how the nature was supreme and human beings were subjected to the forces of nature. However, some philosophers like Kant, for example, and Ritter, they also focused on human geography. I'm talking about this non-paradigmatic stage. Now this tussle between whether geography should study physical geography or human geography, or whether nature is supreme or human being is supreme, this manifested in a more clearer manner during the dual paradigmatic stage. So there was no crisis between this non-paradigmatic stage and dual paradigmatic stage. It was a transition. And here, as I told you, there emerged two different viewpoints. So that's why known as dual paradigmatic stage. Then after the Second World War, there came a crisis phase. There was a crisis in the discipline of geography, since it was seen that geography could not help much in the war efforts. So it was a crisis, and this led to a new paradigm. A paradigm changed, a new paradigm came, and this was a monoparadigmatic stage. And the paradigm, as most of you may be knowing, that during this period from 1950 to 1972, it was the quantitative revolution, where the focus was on economic determinism and the idea of man as an economic rational human being. Fine. So this idea continued up till 1972. But from late 1960s onwards, there was a crisis. It was said that this particular idea of quantitative revolution was not helping to solve the problems of the world, and moreover, it was leading to new problems, like the idea of man as an economic rational human being was used to exploit natural resources by the capitalists, and there were racial tensions in the society. So at this particular time, late 1960s onwards, there was a crisis. And this led to a change, as I told you, that a crisis comes, then a change occurs. So a change occurs in the form of new ideas. So there were three major new ideas that came up during this period, and that's why this period was known as a multi-paradigmatic stage. Fine. So this continued from 1972 to late 1980s. So the three dominant ideas were behavioralism, humanism, and radicalism. So these three were the dominant ideas during the multi-paradigmatic stage. But again, since the late 1980s onwards, a crisis seemed to develop. So this was due to the issue that these particular three major ideas of humanism, behavioralism, and radicalism, they were not able to solve the upcoming new problems of environment. Also, these particular three ideas made human geography very philosophical. And human geography got much away from physical geography, and physical geography was becoming more scientific due to technological development, and human geography was becoming more philosophical. So there was a divergence seen between the two, and this is not good for any discipline, because if the subject matter of the discipline diverges, then that discipline may even cease to exist together as a discipline. For example, geography may cease to exist as a discipline. Humanism can become humanistic approaches can become a separate discipline, and why there is a need to for these different disciplines to remain together as a part of geography. So this was the crisis at that time, and finally, late 90s onwards, after 10 years of in the crisis, we came to a more monoparadigmatic stage through the development of environmentalism. So the problems of environment became very much highlighted, and the geographers, both physical and human, saw that this is the opportunity to get together and save geography from being disintegrated into different disciplines. And now presently we are in the paradigm of environmentalism. So because in environment both human and physical aspects are important, so now we are in the paradigm of environment where both the physical and human geographers are working towards solving the present problems of climate change. Okay. So another concept that I feel that you should be aware of is chorography and chorology. Many students are confused among these two keywords. So it's not that complicated. It's very simple. Both the approaches are a part of regional approach. What chorography means? It means description of geographical aspects in space. It involves collection of information and its systematic arrangement. For example, weather maps, soil maps, and it is based upon the objective view of regions. That is the idea of realism, if you remember that, okay, we can observe the regions and we can collect information through them, and we can arrange information in the form of maps or different methods, and that is called chorography, collection of information and its systematic arrangement. Okay. Now what is chorology? Chorology involves integration of different physical and human aspects to differentiate one region from the other. And it is basically trying to develop a science of geography by making it more analytical and establishing interrelationship between regions. So if I try to explain it in a simple manner, in chorology it is more analytical. Like in chorography, we were only collecting information and making it organized in a systematic manner. Now chorology moves a step further, and after organizing the information, we try to develop some aspects wherein we try to establish interrelationship between different regions, and also we try to differentiate one region from the other. So for example, we may differentiate the subcontinent of India from China through the aspect of monsoon. The Indian subcontinent experiences monsoon. The Chinese subcontinent does not experience. The country of China does not experience monsoon. So that is how we differentiate. And this is using only one aspect, that is the climate. Now suppose I also include race within it. So Indic race is basically a mixed race, and the Chinese race is basically Mongoloid race. So combining these two factors, I may be able to better demarcate the regions. So that is how chorology works. You combine different physical and human aspects to differentiate a space into regions and then establish interrelationship between regions. So it is more analytical. It looks like we are doing some science. Okay. So as I told you that geographers try to show that geography is a science. So they have tried to develop chorology. Their aim is always to develop chorology, but many of them have failed by ending up doing chorography. For example, Hettner. So why this happened? Because by the time they collected information and analyzed it, they arranged it, that is, they did chorography. By the time they were doing chorography, they got retired. So it took a lot of time to arrange the information, to collect information. So they were not able to do chorology. So that's the basic difference between chorography and chorology. So friends, like, share, subscribe and comment. to spread the word about this novel initiative. Thank you.